Hello and welcome to FlightNow. We are tackling a topic today that is critical to the future of aviation and the planet. Sustainable aviation fuels, or SAFs. These have been hailed as a game changer in the fight to reduce carbon emissions in aviation, but how realistic are they as a long-term solution? Can they help us meet the industry's ambitious goal of net zero emissions by 2050? Stick with us as we dive into the history, benefits, challenges, and future of this promising yet complex technology. Let's start with a bit of history. Aviation has traditionally relied on kerosene-based jet fuel, which is highly energy dense but a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. As concerns about climate change intensified, the search for cleaner alternatives led to the development of SAFs. Sustainable aviation fuels are not new. In fact, their development dates back to the early 2000s. The concept is simple, though. Create a fuel that can power aircraft like traditional jet fuel, but with significantly lower carbon footprint. Early experiments focused on biofuels derived from plants and waste materials, and these are still in use today. One of the first major milestones came in 2008 when Virgin Atlantic operated the first commercial flight partially powered by an SAF blend. It was a bold statement, but it also raises many questions. Could SAFs be produced at scale? Would they be affordable? And could they be a long-term solution? Well, today, SAFs can be made from a variety of feedstocks, including used cooking oils, agricultural residues, municipal waste, and even carbon captured from the air. The key here is that SAFs reduce net emissions because the carbon they release during combustion was already part of the natural carbon cycle. So where are we now? Well, according to the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, SAF accounts for just about 0.1% of the global jet fuel supplies. That's a tiny fraction of the more than 300 billion liters of jet fuel consumed every year. Why so little? It comes down to the cost and infrastructure. SAFs are significantly more expensive than traditional jet fuel, 2 to 5 times more, depending on the production method. This makes airlines hesitant to adopt SAFs on their own without financial incentives or perhaps even government mandates. Production capacity is another bottleneck. Bloomberg NEF estimates that SAF production will need to increase by 30 times its current levels by 2030 in order to meet industry targets. This requires massive investments in facilities and supply chains. Policy plays a critical role here. In the European Union, for example, blending mandates under the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative require that airlines use a certain percentage of SAF in their fuel mix. In the United States, the government has taken a different approach, offering tax credits for the SAF production under the Inflation Reduction Acts. Of course, some of that may change with the new administration coming in. But in most parts of the world, SAF adoption remains voluntary, and progress is, quite frankly, pretty slow. Despite these challenges, the industry is moving forward. Airlines like United or Lufthansa are committing to significant SAF purchases, and governments are ramping up funding for SAF research and development. The future of SAF is closely tied to global climate commitments. The International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, which is kind of the UN's branch related to civil aviation, it's pledged to achieve net zero emissions in international aviation by 2050. Airlines, airports, and governments are all working towards this goal, with SAF playing a central role. The European Union, through its Green Deal, has set ambitious targets for SAF adoption. Meanwhile, the U.S. aims to produce 3 billion gallons of SAF annually by 2030. Again, some of that may change with the new administration, but multinational agreements like the Paris Accords, for example, are also designed to pressure countries to decarbonize aviation. However, SAF is not a standalone solution. Industry leaders agree that SAF will need to work alongside other innovations, such as, for example, hydrogen propulsion, battery electric aircraft, and operational efficiencies in order to actually achieve and sustain zero-emission aviation. So let's talk about the benefits. When compared to conventional jet fuel, SAF can reduce life-cycle greenhouse gas emissions by up to 80%. This is achieved by using renewable feedstocks that would otherwise release carbon if left to decompose or burn. SAF also has the advantage of being a quote-unquote drop-in fuel, meaning it can be used in existing aircraft engines and fuel systems with minimal modifications. This makes it a practical option for airlines looking to lower their emissions without investing in fully new fleets. But these benefits are only meaningful if SAF adoption scales up. At current usage levels, again, something like 0.1%, the impact on global emissions is currently negligible. To make a real difference, the industry will need to ramp up SAF production and dramatically increase its adoption over the coming years. And of course, on this note, there are some challenges, and in fact, some big challenges. First of all, there's the blending limit. Aircraft can currently use up to 50% SAF mixed with traditional jet fuels as certified by ASTM International. While tests are underway to certify 100% SAF usage, this is still years away and would require some modifications in aircraft tanks, especially in the ceiling areas of it, using SAF in place of what has historically been fossil fuel burning jet tanks can create some leakages and things as well. So we need new tanks and that sort of deal. Production is another hurdle. SAF requires specialized facilities and supply chains that are expensive to build. According to industry reports, scaling up SAF production to meet demand will require tens of billions of dollars of investment. So again, these need to come from a very public level and a very high level. Then there's also the environmental impact of SAF production. While SAF is more sustainable than fossil fuels, producing it from crops like corn or palm oil compete with food production and harm ecosystems. Synthetic SAF, while cleaner, demands vast amounts of renewable energy in order to make it actually renewable. Finally, cost is a major barrier. Without subsidies or carbon pricing mechanisms, SAF is too expensive currently for widespread adoption. Airlines operate on pretty thin profit margins and are unlikely to absorb these costs without government support or otherwise mandates, which of course will be probably passed through to passengers. So, is SAF the answer to our aerospace sustainability questions? Well, in the short and medium term, absolutely. It's one of the most viable options that we currently have to reduce aviation emissions right now, today. But it's not a silver bullet. SAF cannot on its own deliver zero-emission aviation because, again, it needs to be scaled up to a massively greater level than it currently is, and there are some issues with its production. To truly decarbonize, we will need a mix of solutions. SAF, hydrogen-powered planes, electric propulsion, improved air traffic management. Governments, airlines, and manufacturers will all need to work together to make these things happen. Sustainable aviation fuels are a critical piece of the puzzle, but they are not the whole picture. With enough investment, innovation, and collaboration, SAF can definitely help us take a big step towards our 2050 emissions targets. But it is probably a midterm solution at best, while better technologies and other green technologies are developing and can be deployed at a larger scale. Thanks for joining me today on FlightNow. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow aviation enthusiasts. Until next time, keep your head in the clouds and your sights on greener futures.